Howdy, folks, and welcome to another exciting episode of the Old West Traveler, where we bring you true tales from the days of the Wild West. Today, we're going to Tombstone, Arizona, and checking on Dr. George Goodfellow. Now, let me tell you about one of the most remarkable folks to ever walk the streets of Tombstone, Arizona. That's Dr. George Goodfellow. This man was something else. He was the best there was when it came to treating gunshot wounds, and he even tinkered with bulletproof fabrics long before folks ever thought there was such a thing. He was one of the first doctors in Arizona to understand that if you get bit by a rattlesnake or a Gila monster, he knew what to do to make you live. He also had a fascination with earthquakes, studying and recording their effects. But for all his brilliance, Doc Goodfellow carried a dark chapter from his past, one he couldn't quite shake. You see, before he made a name out west, he started out at the U.S. Naval Academy in Annapolis, Indiana, back in June of 1872. And he wasn't just book smart either. This man could fight. He was one of the Academy's boxing champion in no time, but his fist got him into trouble early on. Now, there was a young man named John Conyers, the first black cadet in Annapolis. Now, you see, John was a target of all kinds of abuse just for the color of his skin. It was ugly, plain, and simple. That Goodfellow, well, he was part of it. One day during a marching drill, Goodfellow and another cadet started kicking and beating John. The higher-ups turned a blind eye to the incident, like they did most of the time when people attacked old John. But things didn't stop there. Just a few days earlier, Goodfellow went and shoved him down a flight of stairs. That attack, along with a string of other brutal acts, eventually got leaked into the newspaper. It turned into a full-blown scandal that folks all across the country were talking about. They sent a 3-man panel to investigate the whole damn mess. Goodfellow, for his part, denied everything, said he wasn't involved. Now, old John well, he didn't or couldn't identify his attackers. But it didn't matter. The investigation found enough, and Goodfellow was kicked out of the academy in December of that same year, just 6 months after he'd arrived. Now, folks don't like to dwell on that part of his life, especially out here in the West, where he became a hero to so many. It's a piece of his history all the same. Even a man as brilliant and skilled as Dr. George Goodfellow wasn't without his demons. And maybe, just maybe, the past is what drove him to be the best out here, saving lives and making couldn't take back. Well, after George got booted from Annapolis, his family wasn't about to let that be the end of his story. They had friends in high places, all the way up to the White House. They tried pulling some strings to get old young George re-enlisted. But 1872 was an election year, and let me tell you, nobody, least of all President Ulysses S. Grant, wanted to get mixed up in a scandal like that. So that was the end of George's dreams of military career before it even got started. But you know, old Goodfellow was a man with many talents and interests. Luckily for him, one of his relatives was a doctor, and he saw some potential in George. He invited him to give medicine a try, and sure enough, the boy had a knack for it. After 4 years of hard study in Ohio, George walked away with a medical degree in hand. That's where things started to turn for him. In 1876, Goodfellow threw his hat into the ring to a medical officer with the 7th Cavalry. Now, had things moved a little quicker, he would have been right there at the Battle of the Little Bighorn with Custer and the rest of them. But bureaucracy is a funny thing. It dragged its feet, and George missed out on what turned out to be a slaughter. So in a strange way, that bit of red tape might have saved his life. Instead, he ended up serving 2 years at Fort Whippy, near Prescott, Arizona. That was some rough country, and George got his hands dirty treating everything from rattlesnake bites to gunshot wounds. After a stint there, he took up another post at Fort Lau over by Tucson, where he stayed for another couple more years. But old George wasn't the type to be sitting in one place for too long. He sure wasn't content to just be another army doctor. Nope, he wanted to be his own man. And by 1880, he figured out how to do it. In September of that year, he packed up and moved to the boom town of Tombstone, where he opened up a private practice. Now, Tombstone in those days was something else. Silver was a-flowing, and the town was attracting all kinds of folks. Gamblers and outlaws, miners and cowboys. And George Goodfellow? Well, he was about to make a name for himself that would stick long after the dust had settled in this Wild West town. Well, folks, I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Old West Traveler. If you enjoyed this episode, please hit that like button. And if you would be so kind, if you're not a subscriber, hit that subscribe button and join us next week for another true tale from the Wild, Wild West.